Wow, it's been a while, friends. I hope you've been doing well. It has been a long time since I've made an actual proper tutorial. Apologize for that. It just has been a very, very busy time for the past couple months. I made a new feature film. I've been touring around, screening it at all different places. I did a really cool screening outdoors in Lake Tahoe under the stars. This film, it's available for free. You can check it out on the NASA YouTube channel. I'll link it in the description. It's a film called Cosmic Dawn that's all about the story of the James Webb Space Telescope. I go into details about how the telescope was made from the very beginning origins and the early planning in the 90s all the way up to its current amazing science that it's doing about 1 million miles away from us at a Lagrange point. Every single day, new beautiful imagery is coming back from this telescope. It's looking at objects in our solar system in addition to objects that are in the far reaches of the universe. And this story in this film is very much a human story, very personal to me. It's a lot of people that I've worked with for a while. And telling their story was pretty emotional. For this film, I did a lot of the original music. I did the sound design for it. We actually got a professional post-production company to come in and do the sound mixing. So be sure to wear proper headphones, or if you've got speakers, surround sound in your home theater, crank that up, listen to it. It really packs a punch in some pretty important scenes like the spacecraft launch, and a number of other moments too. So I really want you to enjoy that, really dig into it and experience that rumble. In addition to that, it's been busy in the freelance front. I've been doing a lot of different projects for a number of different clients. My work was back up on the Sphere in Las Vegas again. I did a project earlier this year for the Smurfs for their new movie that came out. And then also just been doing a lot of my own personal artwork too. It has been a journey to discover new techniques, new software. I've been using Unreal Engine a lot more, both for the work I do for my full-time job at NASA, but also for a lot of my personal projects too. And this has been a long time in the making for me. I've been wanting to make my artwork more immersive for you so that you can pop on a VR headset and walk around in one of these scenes. This is a comment I get like all the time on my videos. It's like, is this place real? And then the second comment is like, if it isn't real, like how can we experience it? Can you put it up on Wallpaper Engine? Can you make it 360 VR for us to walk around? And so, yeah, that's been a dream of mine for a while, is to really make these places real so that you can explore them. I've been doing some more effort there and just brushing up my skills. I think one of the biggest goals in your life is to always be curious, to learn new things, to never have the opinion that you know everything already. Be open to learning new software, be open to learning new techniques, putting yourself out there. The pace of this industry is so fast. I feel like I'll blink and there's a new software that's been released, or there's a new version of Blender somehow that has all these amazing new features packaged in it as well. So yeah, just stay curious. Be doing new stuff, putting yourself out there, trying new things, and yeah, you'll be surprised what you can learn, what you can pick up on. So that is my biggest tip for a lot of you to get involved and learn new things. So for today, I specifically want to talk about the importance of iteration, the importance of returning to old projects of yours for inspiration. It's maybe the last place you'll look for inspiration, but at least in my experience, I feel like it's often been the best place. It's been the most fruitful place when I really just feel totally stuck with artist block. It just sometimes I'm trying to create something new and I scrap that scene and then I start a whole new scene and then I scrap that scene, wash, rinse, repeat. Or you're searching online for inspiration and you see something, it's kind of like shiny object, shiny object. You want to do everything and then you end up doing nothing. And that's a problem. You want to be making new art. You obviously want to be learning new stuff. Ultimately, you want to be putting stuff out there so that you can, get new clients, get new business, grow a following, whatever your goals are. It's important to actually be making stuff in the first place and then actually sharing it. And that is a really hard thing because I'm a perfectionist. I know a lot of you are probably perfectionists at the same time. And it's really scary at times to put yourself out there for criticism. People are harsh online. I've scrolled TikTok quite a bit, and some of the comments that people leave are kind of brutal. I think we need to work on that a little bit, be a little bit more constructive. I think one thing I've really enjoyed about the 3D community is just how open and welcoming everyone is, and how they really just are not afraid to take time out of their schedules to sit with you and teach you something new. The Blender community in particular is fantastic. There's so many free resources from so many different creators in how to learn this software and how to grow your following, make new things, and really just become a master of this software. So, inspiration. For me, a lot of my inspiration personally comes from photo walks. I'll go outside for runs or for walks around town, bring a camera around with me. And what's actually been really cool recently is I just got a new Polaroid camera. It is one of the Instax Mini Evo. It's a hybrid camera, so you can actually take pictures and you don't have to print them on film immediately. You can store them for later if you want to print them, but you can, just use it as just a normal digital camera. And it's got a number of different filters. This is not sponsored, by the way. I just really enjoy this camera a lot. I got it for a Halloween costume. I was Nightcrawler, Jake Gyllenhaal's character, Nightcrawler, Lou Bloom. And I was like, this would be a fun little party trick to be able to take pictures on film with this camera. But I ended up taking it to Bulgaria with me on a recent trip I was on for some software stuff. Explored that Sofia. It was incredible. Took a lot of pictures on this camera. And I just go around here in DC a lot taking pictures, and it's been really fun to just capture that. I think it's been a bit better than just using my phone. Oftentimes I'll use my phone and photo scan things. I think having a little bit more of a rough around the edges touch to the photo is a little bit noisy, a little bit grainy. The colors are a little bit more vibrant. It's helped me actually because that is often the thing I spend the most time on in my post-production and in my editing is the lighting design. I'll come back to this over and over and over and over again, almost to a detriment, to continue revising, tweaking, adding more lights, removing other lights. And yeah, so it's been really cool to have that photo inspiration. But I wanted to specifically talk about this piece, which I've not actually shared on my Instagram yet. I think I teased it maybe in a story or something. But if you're not following me already, I post a lot of behind the scenes stuff on my Instagram, oftentimes before I release things too. So I'll link my socials in the description. But this was a different piece from what I usually do. And it didn't start out this way at all. It was a very different scene. It actually looked like this, which is a lot colder, a lot, moodier. Obviously, you don't really have the plants here at all. It's just this stairway to heaven. And that was kind of my initial goal, was to make this scene where you're walking up a long, rocky staircase up to this dream castle that's perched in the clouds. And so for this scene, the lighting design in particular was really unique. And this is one that I've returned to in different contexts. I just did another project recently too. This one I did release on social media. And it is a neat scene where, very similar design. It's this stairway to heaven, but not as natural with the rocks and those types of natural textures. It's more of this, man-made, dreamy, utopian scene. But it started in the same place as this piece. This was where I spun off of. And this is often how I find a lot of my ideas is don't reinvent the wheel. You've already spent a lot of heavy lifting to design a composition. You've maybe done some initial lighting design. You've maybe even set up some textures or other things as well. If you're working in Unreal Engine, there's often a lot of setup time in the first place to get runtime virtual textures working, to load in objects in the first place, to get things blending properly, to define a landscape, maybe put in some water bodies, some volumetrics, tweak the lighting a bit. I often use ultra dynamic sky. So you've got a lot of these things that you're setting up. And that takes time at the beginning of every single project. For Blender, it's maybe not as much setup out of the box to get something looking proper, but it does take a lot of time to build out a scene from scratch every single time. And if you're just doing that and then you get burnt out by the scene, which often happens, and then scrapping it and then starting all over, it's a lot of effort at every single time to start over and reinvent the wheel. One thing I will say is really helpful, and if you're not doing this, then you should definitely do this. One thing that's the biggest pain at the beginning of every new Blender project is if you just hit File, New General, and open a new project, it's going to default to the default startup from Blender. But if you spent the time, like me, to define a certain setup that really works well for you, and for me, this setup I like the most. I usually have two windows up here. I've actually oftentimes have a second monitor, but for the sake of this video, I've consolidated it down to one. Often I'll have my workspace in the top left dominating the majority of my screen, about maybe a little over a third of my screen is this workspace, and this is where I'm modeling, this is where I'm moving objects around, and I keep this as, my 3D viewport in object mode and edit mode, so I'm able to go around and do things here. I'll have often a smaller window that's in a vertical preview, because oftentimes I'm making stuff for Instagram, for TikTok, for Twitter, and this is in a vertical look here. And so I'll have this as my rendered mode. I'll have my timeline here, which also I can switch really quickly out to be like a graph editor if I'm doing a little bit more keyframing, and I'll keep that there. Sometimes as well, if I'm doing a little bit more texturing, I'll add in another little window here, which will be my UV editor, so I can do a little bit of UV editing. And then I often keep this as my shader window. So if I'm adjusting the shading or the nodes for an object, which also I could really quickly switch to a geometry node editor if I'm working with geometry nodes. And I love this layout. It works really well for me. In addition to that, I've got some render settings that I like having on by default. I pretty much exclusively use cycles. I've also been using V-Ray a bit more on that to come soon. I don't really use Eevee at all, to be honest with you, only for very, very specific projects. So for me, it makes more sense to have cycles on. I use my GPU rendering. I've got two 4090s working together for all my renders. And I've got some render settings as well that I've set up, including some denoisers. I like to use optics denoise in the viewport, and also for my renders. And I've also have samples set here that typically work well for me. Around 100, 150 samples usually works well. And I'll adjust this depending on my project. And then also some other settings too. So I've got, my frame rate set here, my resolution, and then I'll be able to define an output. And it's a pain to set all this up. This takes time. So if you're starting from just the default Blender window, opening it up and having to do all this every single time, that's maybe 5 minutes. That's 5 minutes of your time that you could be doing on something else. And if you're going every single time you open Blender, every single time you boot it up, that really just adds up over the time, and you're going to be wasting your time setting up Blender every single time before you even make art. So this is already wasting your time. So if you don't already do this, I definitely encourage you to do this. So then click on, where are we? It is in the file, and then defaults, and then you can save startup file. So make the current file the default startup file. You want to do this when there's not anything in your scene, ideally. Otherwise, this scene will always be your startup file. If I was to click that now, every time I load up Blender, it's going to show me this castle scene, which I don't necessarily want. But take the time to set up all your windows for an empty scene. Maybe leave that default cube in there or delete it, whatever your preference is, and then click on File, Defaults, Save Startup File. You can also, if you messed up, load your factory settings. This just defaults to the normal vanilla Blender default file. So that's just tip number one in returning to the scene of the crime to make sure that you're speeding up your workflow a bit here. So I've already have that all set up for this. So when I was working around and moving to different scenes, iterating on this, I had that startup file set properly. But let me just break down this scene for you here by just turning some things off first. I'm just going to turn off my castle lights here. And then I'm actually also going to turn off all of these lamps that I've added in here. And you can see just how much this changes the scene. First of all, you can't see anything except for my night sky here, which, by the way, for basically every single scene I do in Blender, I use physical starlight and atmosphere for my lighting. This is really fantastic because it's procedural skies. Blender does have some built-in sun and sky textures that you can use that are okay. I feel like they're good enough to get stuff done. You can also obviously use HDRIs. There's a number of free ones available for you to use in your scenes. They do pretty well, but obviously it's a static image unless you're animated, with the texture. But oftentimes it's a static image. So once you load that in, your lighting is locked in to that scene. So with physical starlight and atmosphere, what I really like about it is the flexibility to be able to really just change every single parameter in this down to specific physics properties of the atmosphere, scattering, stars and Milky Way intensity. You can add in procedural fog to all of your objects. And then there's a lot of really fun artistic controls for fall off of your atmospheric effects, your haze in the background. So if I zoom in here and you look at this atmosphere of the stars, you can see this is how it actually looks like in the night sky. If you're looking at a night sky, closer you get to the ground, there's often a little bit more light pollution closer to your surface that you'll see bleeding into the sky. And it's not always even, obviously. So you see there's a little bit of a noise almost to this, where maybe there's a little bit brighter city skylight here, and then it fades up, and then you're looking through less atmosphere the higher up you're looking here. So it's a deeper, darker sky and not as much of that light pollution. So this is actually how the atmosphere works in real life. And so it's really nice to be able to adjust this super quickly. I'll spend a lot of time tweaking this, probably too much time tweaking this to get it to look like how I want it. So for this scene, I knew that I wanted to have clouds. I knew that I wanted this to be this floating heavenly oasis. And to be able to do that, I really needed to light these clouds properly. If you've ever worked with volumetrics in Blender before, they have a number of problems. I won't say issues, but problems associated with them to get them to work, and not only work, but also not kill your computer, because it is a lot for the light to bounce through all of the different particles of a volume layer to get to the camera to be able to register that and to render out an image. And I have a number of these clouds in here. I've duplicated the same one and rotated it different ways. I think I only have 2 different variations of clouds in here. Yeah, there's only 2 different ones that no, 3 different ones that I've added in here and then scaled and rotated different ways. And when you're looking at it, you can't tell that it's the same cloud because it's a different angle or different scaling. And this is a really quick way so you don't have to keep modeling new clouds or generating new ones in Houdini or whatever you're doing to make these. You can just use the same object. So clouds are very particular. So let me turn on the lights again here for my castle here. And these are also ones I'm using to light the clouds. And I just want to click on a couple here in particular to talk through this. First of all, I'm just going to click on the cloud itself. And we're going to switch over to my shader editor here so I can show you. I've made a one-size-fits-all volume shader for my clouds here. And it's a super simple one. Blender has a really good principal volume node that is very nice. I think out of the box, it works pretty well. There's a couple things I adjust, and basically everything else I leave the same. The 2 main things you're adjusting to really make your clouds look good are the color of it, including actually the luminosity of it, the brightness, and then the density. So for example, if I look on one of these clouds here, let's click on one that's nice and visible here. This one here, this is a good one, right? Let me look. And I just want to zoom in on this here in my render. So you can see this cloud, and I'm just going to adjust a couple parameters, and I want to show you how much of an effect this has on it. So obviously, if you go to the color, and if I make this, like, let's say red to really show this, and I just go to the most saturated version of red, you'll see what happens here. So this is adjusting it for all of it because it's universal shader, but you can see just how much of an impact this has. This now looks like one of those little like smoke bomb things that a lot of people used to take pictures with back in the day, and it looks terrible. But you can see the saturation, the color really has a huge impact on the look of this. And then if I actually go into here, so this is the value of it, basically the brightness. And this is the value, the brightness of the clouds. And you can adjust this one of 2 ways by using the slider here on the right, which I tend to prefer because I feel like you have a little bit more of an idea of the brightness of this. Or you can actually go down to the slider here where it's a numerical value and you can slide it up and down. You can see that's impacting it in both places. Let me just pull it down for here to very dark. And we'll click off, and you can see now the clouds are almost like black now because the brightness is still low. So it's still, if you were to look at the right angle, or if you light this really brightly, you can still very faintly see that kind of twinge of red there. But just because it's set to so dark, it's really just almost like this black smoke from a fire there. So this is so important, the color of your volume. And for me, like I said, I like these to be bright, obviously fluffy, not with a very particular color on it. And it also depends on the scene. So for this scene, it was a night scene. I already knew that I was going to be doing a night scene. So I wanted the clouds to have like a very slight twinge of blue to them. So if you're looking at this dial here, you can see it's ever so slightly moved off center where it's pure white to just a little bit more of cyan, maybe a little bit of a greenish. And this is only further enhanced by actually the lighting design of my scene itself, using that HDRI, or not HDRI, the physical starlight atmosphere, which is casting, very subtle, very dark, but noticeable enough lightness, ambient light on these clouds from the environment. And then I enhance that further actually with the lighting design, which I'll get into in a second. And then I want to talk about this other property for VDBs, which is the density of it. So obviously the thickness of this cloud, this translates to, an actual physical property. And so I like to keep this very low. If I was to crank this up, let's just make this extreme. I'll go to 10. You'll see what happens here. So the clouds become really very defined. They almost kind of look like rocks in a way. If I zoom in on here, you can just see it doesn't look fluffy. This looks menacing. Maybe you're going for that. Maybe you really want it to look, bumpy, ridged like this, but this looks like a really thick smoke, which isn't what I'm going for my scene. Again, that's what you're going for. by all means, experiment, be creative. I always encourage you with all these tutorials, if you don't like the direction I'm going, you want to go off on your own tangent, explore that tangent, take it to the nth degree, do what you want to do, make it happen, experiment, have fun with it. But for me, this is not what I'm going for. So I tend to prefer very light clouds. I often go for value well below 1. In this case, I set it on 0.4. I thought this looked really nice. The clouds are less defined because we have a lower density, but that's fine. I want them to look very puffy, very fluffy. This is a utopia in the clouds. I don't want it to look scary. I don't want it to look menacing. I want it to look inviting. And so that brings me to the lighting design, which is really important for how we define these clouds even more. So I've got a couple important lights that are doing some of the heavy lifting here. So if I go to this one in particular, I want to talk about something that my head is currently blocking on your screen, which let me just move my head off to the side here for a second. Boom. So this is something called ray visibility. And in Blender, there's some really exciting stuff that's happened recently with lights in particular that you can actually do to edit. I'm working in version 4.4. I think coming to version 5, there's even more features. But if I go into the lighting tab, I believe it's here. Is it the lighting tab? No, it might still be in, yes, shading. So in the shading tab, this is something that's pretty standard for other software. So if you've worked with something like Redshift before, Octane or V-Ray, a number of these things, you'll have this already. So this is familiar to you. But I feel like this has taken a while to get to Blender. But you have something called light linking, shadow linking, light grouping. And so you can actually add like specific collections of lights that will be impacted or will impact the scene in different ways. So you can see create new light linking collection used by the active emitter. You can do the same thing for shadows or for light groups. And this is a nice way to exclude certain objects or certain things from being impacted by the lighting design. But for this one, I didn't really need to go that crazy. For this one, I was just trying to exclude the lights from the rest of the scene and only have them impact the volume objects in my scene, which were only these clouds in this case. Typically for something like this, I would also add in just a massive cube that encompasses the whole scene with a volume scatter node or principal volume, and that is my atmospheric haze for the scene. But for this one, I felt like that was a little bit too much. I didn't really need that much fall off for it. I didn't really want that much haze. I wanted this to be pretty defined so that you can look properly at the scene and walk up in and it looks really nice. But if you click on this light and I go to the object properties and I scroll down, you'll notice there's this tab called ray visibility. And so typically what's checked on for this is you have diffuse, you have glossy, you have transmission. And so if I check all those on, let me zoom in, you can see how this is changing on objects. Like look at this area here in particular. If I turn off the diffuse, boom, wow, that had a huge impact on this. I didn't really want that cloud to, or that castle rather, to be that defined with just this light. And it also looks kind of spooky because the light itself is a bluish light. If I go to the light properties, you can see I've made this a bluish light. I don't want that light impacting the rest of the scene. I don't want it to impact these trees. I want it to feel very inviting, very warm, this pathway, but I want the clouds to feel more atmospheric, more blue, matching the blues, very deep colors of the stars. And so I excluded everything from that light except for the volume scatter. And I did this for a couple different things. And so you can see the impact that this has on the clouds as well. So if I check this on and off, this light is not impacting anything. So this light is basically in essence useless right now. But if I turn on the volume scatter, you can see it's brightening up these clouds. It's making them look puffy, making them look inviting. And I've done the same thing for a number of other clouds in my scene, including this one over here. This is also for the right-hand side of my scene. If I turn this one on and off, you'll see subtle effect, but it's enough to give some detail. There's also this one below the clouds here too. That's also impacting that layer below, also very subtle. You're not really noticing it too much, but it's enough that I was experimenting on and off and was noticing that effect on my scene. I've got some ones over here. This is impacting the ones in the back of my scene. Again, extremely subtle, but this is why like I'm a bit OCD with lights is like I just spend way too much time literally tweaking things that maybe adjust like 5 pixels on my screen, but those 5 pixels, at least in my eyes, make a very big difference and I want it to look right and proper. So I spend a lot of time adjusting that and making it work properly. So that is the way to fix it, is to go to your ray visibility. So that is the key lighting design for the scene right there. So I wanted to talk about the other elements in the scene, which are these plants here. So that was the first step after I had kind of designed that initial scene that I showed you. I'll play it again here. This was just the base scene I'd modeled out very quickly. I pulled some rocks from the Quixel library to define those stairs. And then for the castle, I pulled that from a Kitbash 3D library. I do often model a lot of my own things, but for this one, I wasn't really as focused on that. I was kind of going more for speed to make a scene very quickly, to do some experimentations with clouds mixed with plants, to just mock something up and see how this would look. So I was less concerned about the modeling, and in this case, more concerned about the lighting design and also some of those textural and natural elements like the plants and lighting from lamps. So this is the base scene. Let me actually turn off some of the other key elements here in my scene that really just brought this up to a beautiful level. So this is where we started. And, you know, it's a pretty cool scene already. I really do like this pathway that I've modeled here. I think it looks quite nice. You can see just how it slopes up really nicely into the scene. And, you know, a lot of 3D is faking it until you make it. There's just massive gaps in here. These stairs are just sort of floating, but I knew where the camera is going to be. I defined that motion pretty early on. And this is another tip for you as well. When you're building a scene, don't do more than you have to. And this is important for two reasons. One, it's a lot of extra work for you, right? It's building new stuff, it's adding new things in. If you're doing a scene for VR 360, yes, it's important to define the space around you, but you don't have to go crazy. It's, you know, it's only what the camera or what the user is going to see that's important to define. So there's literally nothing behind this camera at all. Nothing. The scene itself is in front of the camera. I knew that going in. This isn't a VR project. The second reason why this is important is because you don't want to overload your system. The more objects in your scene, obviously the more that has to be rendered in, the more that's processed in your memory. It's a lot of extra stuff for your computer to work with. And this is just going to slow you down, both as you're editing in the viewport, making your scene, but then also rendering. It's loading in more textures, it's loading in more objects. This is just gonna bog down your scene. So focus early on nailing in your camera perspective, or at the very least, defining where you want your camera to be. You can always make some tweaks later on. So I knew this was gonna be a fairly short scene, about 10 seconds of just a quick camera push as if you're walking up this stairway. So I start here, this is my initial keyframe at the base of this staircase. You can look at my camera. And then I have it going up just a couple flights of stairs. And so then the final view, you're up a couple stairs, you're looking up, the camera's tilted up a bit more, and you're looking at this castle in the distance. So I defined that early on. And then, once that was defined in, I wanted to actually add more details into the scene. It's increasing the level of detail. It's making the scene more immersive. It's making it more inviting. Right now it looks kind of spooky. It looks like something out of Frankenstein, a little scary. You know, this could be going for the Halloween vibes that just happened a couple of days ago. It was Halloween here. But I wanted this to be like a lot of the other pieces I make, warm, inviting, dreamy. You know, this is somewhere you actually want to explore. It's not a creepy castle at the top of a cloudscape. So to do that, I brought in plants, and I use a number of different add-ons for this. One of my friends, Sweeper 3D, just released a fantastic new add-on for this. This is top the charts on Blender Market, which has now become Superhive, if you're not aware of that change. Link this in the description for you to check out. It's fantastic. It is over, I have it loaded in here. It's called Arborea, and it is really, really nice for a number of different purposes, including actually scattering objects. I didn't use that for this particular use case for this scene, but you can do that really well. It's got great animations in it as well. But what really excels is just, he's done a fantastic job at modeling a number of different plants, flowers, trees, and little shrubs. Also some really cool fantasy elements too. If I search by fantasy element, there are these really cool pine trees. So I used a couple of these in the scene. Some of these beautiful weeping willows with just some really great vines that just have such nice details, and it really just brings in the scene really well. You can also sort by seasons. So I'm just looking at summer assets, just autumnal assets, and winter, barren, snow-covered trees. It's got it all covered. It's really great. There's even some ground cover too. If you're scattering some of these leaves, which I've done quite a bit. There's sticks and logs. There's also grass, which works really well too for your scatter elements. And then the flowers, as I mentioned, which are really fantastic. I'll scatter a lot of these in the scene, both by hand, but then also adding them to the scene using the scatter technique. So I can turn on all the sweeper assets I've used for this scene, which there are quite a few of them. You can see I've added a couple flowers in, and then some of those fantasy trees here. But what I was noticing, which I'll get to in a second, is that they're sort of getting lost. There's a lot of really great detail if I look in object mode here at these. You can see these really great vines and really nice, interesting, unique root and trunk patterns here. You can see these really cool roots hanging off the edge of this cliff. And I really wanted those to be a little bit more detailed. But if you look at my rendered mode, they're sort of getting lost in the shadows here. And so one of the last things I actually did was adding in light to that. So I'll get to that in a second. But I wanted to turn on more of these assets as well. Two other nature assets that I just can't go without. One is Botan IQ. From Polygon IQ, they've got a number of different asset libraries and things. If I turn them on, I didn't use quite as many of their assets for the scene. I only actually used one tree for this scene. You can see this one that's highlighted here. But usually I'd use a lot more of their stuff for my scenes. And if I go over to their add-on specifically, it is in this Polygon IQ. And if you have these installed, they have a couple different things as well. They've got this traffic one, they've got this aquatic one, and it's all under this free asset browser called Ngon. And it works just like the asset browser in Blender, where you click on Browse Assets and it says Select Area with Mouse. And typically I use this area in the bottom left to serve as my asset browser. And it has it nicely organized in the same way that an asset library would look in Blender, with these really nice, easy to access menus. The one I use for this scene was Shaker Trees, which I've loaded in. This is an additional add-on that I've also linked in the description that you can get for this. And you can sort by specific types of trees too. So for this one, I used one of their deciduous trees and brought this into the scene. But they also have some other really great stuff too in the Botan IQ element, similar to that Sweeper 3D, the Arborea. You've got a number of different really great plants that you can sort through. Tropical trees. You've got little corals and flowers and things like that. And then they also have an additional add-on if you're interested in adding in more objects like trains, cars, planes, bicycles, scooters, boats, ferries, to your scene. They've got this. I don't really do this as much, but this is a really nice option. So I use some stuff from there. And then the last one I can't go without is my favorite one for the longest time here from one of my friends, B Production. This comes with a nice little asset browser. It's called Vegetation. I'll also link this one in the description. And this one I really like a lot for some of their scatter bushes. Their garden plants. They've got some really nice spirea bushes, which I used to have in my backyard growing up. So they always have a soft spot for me. I really like them. They're very hardy plants, actually, if you're looking for plants in real life. They really stand the test of the seasons. They come back really nice and full every year. There's a groundhog that used to live under the ones that we had in my backyard. I think it's still there, maybe. But for me, very special plant, and they did a really good job with a couple different variations of them. So I use those quite a lot in my scenes just for kind of the sentimental reasons. But, it's fun. And so, yeah, this is the vegetation for my scene, but still it's got this creepy look to it. If you look at it here in the rendered mode, let me just hide this menu here so you can see this a bit better. It looks dark still. I mean, the clouds look nice and fluffy. It's framing the scene well. It's got that ethereal look, but the castle looks scary. It's kind of this abandoned place. It's not really highlighting a lot of the nice vibrant colors from the vegetation models. You've got some of these really nice pinks and purples and yellows and oranges that are just not coming through at all. It's still overall very purple, very blue, very dark in the scene. And so I really want this to come to life. So for that, this is the last step, which often I think takes the longest time in all my renders, which is the lighting design. And so I'm just going to check this on and just show you the difference this makes. So boom, with just some pretty simple, I'll break it down, but it's pretty simple lighting design with just a couple lamps selectively placed. This scene has just come to life so much more, and it looks so inviting. The stairs are highlighted more. We've got some really nice shadows. It's highlighting the details in these rocks specifically. We'll check this on and off. Let me check this off again. You can see like a lot of the stairs are sort of lost. It's very shadowed. So you're only really seeing the very top parts of this because of some of the lights that I have placed above the scene. So this one here is actually impacting everything. And if I go to my lighting for the castle, I'm just going to turn this on and off. You can see what this is doing. It's highlighting just the upper portion of this trail. This same one is doing the same thing. If I'll turn this on and off, you can see just how big an impact this particular light has on the scene. It's a cold light though. It's a blue light with pretty low intensity and a fairly large radius. So it's scattering some light here on my scene. I have soft fall off enabled so that this is blending in well, but you can see it's really a lot of the details for this are specifically getting lost. So I wanted to bring this back. And so this is where I thought to add in some lamps, really framing the scene well and guiding you through it. And this just brings out so much more detail. If I zoom in on these rocks, you can see I've scattered some leaves and things across here too that are coming out really nicely. And it's so much more inviting. And it's extremely simple what I did here. It maybe looks a little bit complex with all of these different things here. But I just took one asset. This is one from Quixel. It's a lamp, a really nice Japanese style lamp. And I've placed one light inside of it. So if I click on this one here, you can see there's one point light, very small radius, 0.08 radius, and very low intensity, because if the smaller the radius you get, the brighter the light is going to be with things. So if I crank this up to like 100, you can see it becomes like almost like a pure white light. If I crank this up to like 1,000, you can see it's like really insane how bright that is. It's just this very, very white. It's losing all the color of the source. So you want to lower this power down the smaller you make that radius. So it's illuminating the interior. So if you look at this one that's closer to the camera, this is going to be a little bit easier to see. This has an inner light, beautiful inner light here. If I click on this one here. So this is point light 18, and do a little bit better job than me maybe in labeling things. I try my best to organize things in collections just so I can quickly toggle things on and off to see how they're impacting the scene. But for individual objects, it's often better to have a more descriptive name than point light 18. Maybe give it an idea of where it is located in my scene. This is me critiquing myself here. I should have been like, this is lamp 10 close, something like that. And that would have given me a little bit more idea. Okay, it's a lamp that's closer to my scene. And that narrows it down from like the 10 or 12 lamps I've placed in my scene to, oh, okay, yeah, this is the very first lamp that you encounter in my scene. It's lamp number 1, not point 18. So, okay, a little bit of a lesson there for me to learn from, but I digress. This light has a point light that's in the center. And you can see it's that same one that I used before. Once I've defined a look for one, I apply this in batch to all the rest of them. And I usually would do a linked duplicate. So what that means is, I can copy and paste these lights. So I click on this and then I hit Alt-D instead of Shift-D. And that makes a linked duplicate. And so then any changes I make to its parent, the original one, will apply to every single instance of that. And this just makes it easier if you're trying to make batch changes. So you don't have to go to each individual object you place to adjust its lighting, adjust its scaling, or whatever. If you adjust it on the one, it applies it to everything. But obviously that locks you into things. So for this scene, I didn't do that because sometimes with lighting can get a little bit finicky. And if you are making these batch changes, if stuff is closer to the camera, it might just all of a sudden be very blown out. If you don't want stuff as far away being as bright, and you're adjusting a global object, it's applying it to everything, you might not have as much control or much flexibility over it. So for lighting in particular, I tend to not like to use linked duplicates as much, just so I have a little bit more flexibility to go into individual lights and turn their intensity up or down, change their color slightly, change the radius size, whatnot, just to make a little bit more making sense. So that is the core of this, was this little tiny light in the middle. But this isn't really doing enough. So if I zoom back out here, you could see there's a second lamp that I've offset just a slight bit and increased its radius quite a bit. I've also ramped up its power just to match because it gets a little bit darker as you increase that radius. But this is point light 19 here. So if I turn this off, you can see the impact that this is having. So this is just that light in the core in the middle. If I turn this off, you can see what it looks like without. And there it goes within. And so this is illuminating obviously the inside of this lamp and a little bit of the surroundings around here. But I want this to splash light on a little bit more of the scene beyond just that very small area. And so to couple with it, I have this additional light on top of it. And you can see the difference that this is making. It's just illuminating a lot more. So there is obviously that very bright core source that draws your eye into this lamp. But then you've got this splash of light that's applied to a much larger radius of the scene. And this is duplicated a number of times throughout the scene. You can see there's a couple lamps that I've scaled and rotated and placed in different places along the staircase, leading up ultimately to this castle in the distance, which has a couple lamps at its doorsteps. You can see there's a couple here, there's one right here, there's one right there, there's one right there, that really draw your eye ultimately up to this castle at the top of the cliff. And that is the scene. This is really all I did. It was a fairly quick one to put together, but it involved a lot of what I mentioned with this iteration on your scenes, going back in, changing things, tweaking things, returning to old versions of stuff as you're building this all out. And so I had a blast with this. This is, like I said, one of my favorite ways to go back and learn and iterate and learn new things and try stuff out is to revisit old scenes. So I encourage you to do the same for your work. If you're feeling stuck, go back to an old project and work with it, pick up where you left off, change things, change the environment, change the time of day, change the season, move your camera around, explore the scene in different ways, change your perspective. This, I think, is a way to grow. And this is how a lot of the great artists over the years have done this. It's, a different medium, obviously. So one of my favorite painters of all time is Claude Monet, impressionist, and defined the genre of impressionism. What he would do is he would go to the same exact place, but at different times of day, and do studies of it. He has some very famous series where he's looking at, the same cathedral at 4 a.m., at 7 a.m., at 1 in the afternoon, at 10 p.m. And it looks different, obviously, because the lighting is different. There's different people there. There's different colors. Maybe there's a renovation going on or whatever. There's other stuff happening. And it's a challenge for you as an artist because you're capturing that story in a different context. It's the same, but different. It's the same scene, but with different lighting, with different textures, with different plants, different seasons. The trees that were once there before are now barren. There's leaves on the ground. There's snow piling up in the corners of the windows. So do these studies in real life and then bring that into 3D. This is the best way to grow, is by observing real life. 3D is way too perfect out of the box. When you bring in that default cube, those edges are perfectly smooth. They're perfectly, aligned. Those corners are super sharp. Nature really doesn't behave like that. The lighting is different. There's edges that are roughed up. There's weathering. Stuff has been eroded. There's gaps. There's holes. There's scratches, and there's wear and tear. You don't want to overdo it, but at the same time, you do want to try to observe real life, how it works in the wild, and that is the best way to grow. Drop in the comments a piece that you're working on. I'd love to check it out. For an upcoming video, I'm hoping to critique some of your artwork, talk about how you can make it better. So if you'd like to submit to that, drop a link to your Instagram in the description, or in the comments rather. I'll check it out. I'm going to pull a couple for some future videos to use. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you learned something from here, and I'm very excited to see your proper work very soon. Have a good one. Thanks so much.